Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Agentic Thinking. Matthias, can you believe it? We're already there at episode 24. It has only been like a
No
month.
way.
Yes, we're
Seriously?
episode 24 already. There's so many conversations happening with Rayfin coming out. I did a lot of demos 2 weeks ago around just building one video every day of the week, just to build more videos there around how to use the tool, how to leverage it. We're jumping back in today for conversations around net new news around all things agentic as well. So welcome everyone back to the show. Matthias, hello. It's great to see you again.
Absolutely.
What are we talking about today?
Well, so many news to catch up on. So a couple of weeks ago, we were really excited about Fable, which had just been released. What happened to Fable since?
Gone.
Yeah, right.
It's out.
So that was a short ride.
I wish I had been smart enough to say, when I got access to Fable, I should have just run it on all my code bases and say, find all the security holes, write me a report around all the security gaps I have, because I don't have access to it now. It's literally gone. I can't use it at this point.
It's wild. Weirdly enough, I saw it documented on Azure Foundry the other day. So I think lots of providers are still sort of struggling to even update the documentation on it. As far as I'm aware, unless I missed something, it's still not available. Let's just go with that, right? And since we're talking Anthropic, and since we talked so much around pricing changes, they did a very, very interesting and very quiet U-turn. So a few weeks ago, we talked about Anthropic announcing a pricing change to their subscription models that would have come in June 15th, which was a week ago. And that was specifically with respect to using Claude Code headlessly. So either the Claude Code SDK or using Claude-P, right? Which basically allows you to run it in an automated fashion. And they said starting June 15th, you're no longer going to be able to use your subscription budget, if you will, whenever you invoke the tool in such a sort of automated fashion. And then just a few days before the 15th, very quietly, they suddenly put a note on the announcement saying they're pausing that and they're not going to introduce it. And that's still the case now. So nothing's changed.
Interesting.
They say they're reviewing alternative options, but so far nothing's been announced. Very interesting. So for the time being, make the most of your Claude subscriptions. You know, if you want to use it non-interactively, because this is as much as you're going to get out of it. As you can. It will, you know, if and when it changes, it definitely will not change for the better.
I think this is really interesting that they're doing this. And I would also argue this is probably a large pushback from the community, and seeing how much of the community is using this, you know, running Claude standalone without, you know, headless, without having to have someone in front of it. That's part of the value of having the agents around in general. And so not being able to have that access to your Pro and Max subscriptions is actually a really big deal, I think, for a lot of people. So likely the community, and I say this a lot about Microsoft MVPs, it's like the invisible hand that can move Microsoft, right? We have the ability to like rally the troops and be vocal about what we're not happy about feature change wise, and kind of move or shift some of the sentiment one direction or the other to get a product that we actually like to use and want to leverage. Maybe this is part of the same thing around the community around Anthropic. So hopefully it stays. Hopefully that we get to continue to use this with our Claude subscriptions. So that's another good one. In other news, I just want to maybe along these lines, with Mythos or Fable disappearing from the market, we actually had a new contender in the market. Have you seen this new one from Japan? Has recently been announced. There's a new model called, I'm going to get the name wrong, Asana.ai. So it's a Japanese model that's apparently ranking really high in the marks from a new company. So I think there's this nervousness around, well, let's talk about some of the political issues here. US and Anthropic puts out this model, And then all of a sudden the US says, nope, the government says, shut it down. Only US citizens can use this model. So how do you verify that only US citizens are using the model, and all these other kind of implications? Because it's security risks or whatever they say. Well, now every other nation state is like, well, we should have our own AI as well, because they need to compete at that Mythos-like level. But do they have the same level of capability? So now it's competing areas where we want to have a lot of these countries actually have access to these really high-end models for their citizens and their development, and making sure their company can move, their part of the world can move forward. So this is really interesting. Did you see this announcement around Asana AI?
Possibly. I don't particularly recall it, but one thing I do recall, and I definitely wanted to mention that today, GLM 5.2 has been in the news a lot
I saw that
lately,
one as well.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Open source. That's one from China
Absolutely.
again.
Yeah. Yes. So new, almost frontier model, open
Yep.
source from China. And there's a lot of noise currently that basically compares it to Opus, but at a fraction of the price.
Like almost like half the price at this point is what I was seeing.
Yeah,
some documentation around.
Yes. So this one is interesting. It's probably worth pointing out to people. If you're not looking into using local models, right? If you're using open source models but from some provider, it's very important for you to check what their data retention policies are.
Sure.
So I personally use Vercel AI Gateway a lot. It's basically a wrapper around all kinds of model providers, which means you have one bill, you have one API, you have one very neat interface to see all your model consumption, but they do not host models. They just route your request to other providers, which could be Microsoft or Anthropic or OpenAI, whatnot, right? And so when you, obviously we're not doing screen shares on this podcast, but if you go to the model list on Vercel AI Gateway, if you click through to individual models, you can actually see which providers they support, and it then also shows per provider whether or not your requests are used for training or not, and whether or not there's a zero data retention policy in place. And sometimes the exact same model can be offered through different providers, but actually with, for instance, one of them retains your data, others don't. So sometimes there's a pricing to check that. They also have an option if you're on a pro account to say only make providers available to me that actually offer zero data retention. And so that's basically a global filter, and that gives you complete certainty.
Like that.
And so why am I saying that? We talked GLM 5.2, we talked models from China or elsewhere, open source. If you want to seriously look into them, particularly sort of in a business context, things like data retention are very, very important. And so this is a very neat way for you to check, right? Is that something your provider offers? Do you want to select, you've got a choice of 5 providers. Do you want to select only the 3 that actually have that retention, even if maybe their pricing is slightly higher? So definitely something to look into. It's certainly something I did recently, which is why I thought I'd share it.
So this is the Vercel. I'm looking at trying to find the guide for this one. There's a guide around the cost-aware model routing with AI Gateway. Is that what you're kind of describing, or is there a specific feature that it's actually doing?
Vercel AI Gateway is the
AI Gateway.
Is the name of it. Tool.
Got it. Yep.
You basically load money into an account, and then sort of you use it.
Perfect.
And they have very competitive pricing. very, very neat tracking interface for all your requests, and obviously a single endpoint you target. So very
Awesome.
neat, actually.
So I'm putting that in the chat window as well. So it's the Vercel AI Gateway. I'm actually not using that one yet. That's a good thing you bring that up.
Open Router would be another one, actually. That is
okay.
well known, right? So it's a competitor to Open Router.
Okay.
Interestingly, Open Router tends to be more expensive for some models compared to Vercel.
Okay. Excellent. One that I'm using a lot right now is I'm using Foundry a ton. So Foundry is like my model provider of choice. And
absolutely.
I kind of by default, everything that comes out of Foundry is no data retention policy. I'm not passing data through to the other model providers as well. Another kind of interesting development in this as well is XAI is doing a lot more contracts work with other companies. So I've actually seen some news around this idea of like, well, now we need data centers with compute on them. And now there's a lot of like revenue generation coming from organizations that want to host models and run a service, and you need the hardware. I've seen to the tune of like $4 billion over the next couple months. They're borrowing at a $124,000 a month bill, a lot of hardware to run these models on. So this is now becoming another whole economy around, do you have the hardware? And if you have the hardware, if you have large Colossus-like size machines, you can start using that as leverage to have people host models and run models through things, which is very interesting. Find that really neat as well. So I'm going to put here the Open Router as well. So Open Router here in the chat window as well. For those who want to check that out as well.
If you don't mind, just a quick note on Foundry.
Yeah.
So something which is worth noting. Okay, so people maybe don't know. Basically, for LLMs, there are three main alternative APIs that are currently established in terms of how you can talk to an LLM. There's the OpenAI chat completions, which is the original sort of that's been around for the longest.
Standard.
Yeah. Then there's the OpenAI Responses API, which is much newer, and that's more tailored towards the needs of agentic systems. So more modern. And then there's the Anthropic Messages API, which is on par with OpenAI responses. And the issue with Foundry models is that they don't provide all of those APIs for each model. In particular, they only offer the chat completions API, which is quite dated now for a lot of their models. So from my point of view, that's actually quite a disadvantage compared to other providers like Vercel, for instance, where you don't have to make those kinds of choices. So it's quite technical. I appreciate it. And maybe people will never even have looked into sort of different LLM APIs, but ultimately that kind of stuff is really important when it comes to being token efficient, for instance. And because, responses and messages APIs, they are particularly tailored towards caching and being able to be very very effective with respect to the payload that's being sent back and forth.
And we're getting to this phase of like agents were just kind of thrown out into the world, and everyone was trying to figure out how to use them. And I think we're starting to step into this optimization phase. I keep saying like we're phase one of every kind of technology is get it working, get it out there, get people using it. And then phase two feels like come back, optimize. Again, I'm also seeing a lot of messaging around, mixed models, and use some models that are on your local machine and other models that are in the cloud. And how do we run these higher end models? I saw an article just yesterday talking about the GLM 5.2, and if you use a lower quantization of the model, meaning that you shrink the size of it, you can run parts of it on a smaller machine. And now they're doing run the layer of AI modeling that you need at the time. So like hot loading parts of the model and running the AI through that. So there's all these new techniques around trying to bring these models local on your machine, again, driving down costs. And if you have a machine, someone did the math. It was like pay hundreds of dollars a month for an AI or run it locally for like the cost of electricity, which was like $1 or less a month. Something insane, because the cost of electricity.
In the UK, that's for sure.
That's true. You have a much higher price over there. But as I'm looking at this going, Yeah, if the price differential becomes so high and you want
Hmm.
that agent to run all the time and not run out of things, or even for security standpoints, you don't
Right.
want to send any data to somewhere else. Like these, I think localized models are going to become more and more tuned to a very specific purpose. Why not run much smaller models that are very refined for what you want it to do or build?
Hmm.
Why do I need an image processing model if I'm just going to send it code all the time? Like that doesn't make sense to me. So I think we're getting to this optimization era where we're going to have models that are going to be much more efficient that way.
Which is a perfect segue into something I was quite keen to talk about today.
Great.
Loop engineering is
Ah,
something that's all over the place right now. I'm
this is a
sure
great
you've
topic. Yeah.
heard of it as well, right?
Yep. hmm This
Um,
is super hot right now. Give us the run for like people who haven't heard about loop engineering with agents. Give us the high level overview, Matthias. What is
okay,
this thing about?
right. So it all kicked off with a famous quote, well, now famous quote by Peter Steinberger, open Claude
hmm
guy.
hmm
I'm quoting, he said, "You shouldn't be prompting coding agents anymore. You shouldn't be prompting coding agents anymore." Let me emphasize that.
Yeah.
You should be designing loops that prompt your agents. So that is pretty much what loop engineering is.
hmm
We've basically come from prompt engineering a couple of years ago to context engineering, which was really big last year. And
hmm
now we're in the loop engineering space, right? So prompt engineering was all about us learning to prompt our LLM, to prompt the agent very well, to get the best possible outputs. We've then moved on to realizing, well, we need to focus much more on context management because context windows are so precious and so limited.
hmm
That's how skills came in and progressive disclosure. And that's when people learned, about tracking the size of their context window and
hmm
being very efficient with memory files. But nonetheless, even with very efficient context engineering practices, you if you were very serious and working with agents, you ended up having to be very reactive
hmm
and having to basically put a prompt in, let your agent work, either for a minute or if you're lucky for half an hour. But then you were still presented with some output and probably sort of some overstatement with respect to how successful they were. And so you were back in the loop there. So ultimately, that one doesn't scale, particularly because you don't know when that happens, right? You don't know, do I need to sit here and wait because I'm going to have to come up with another prompt in a minute, or
Yeah.
do I allow myself to completely context switch to a different project because this one may well run for 30, 45 minutes? You don't know, right?
hmm
And so basically, at scale, this one is quite a burden on you as an engineer. So, which is how we basically move to loop engineering, where we're saying, put another agent in there to be the first responder.
hmm
Think about how you train and instruct an agent to be the one who receives the first agent's response, and then to act on that. By either
hmm
um, pushing back or delegating to another reviewer agent, or actually running some tests and sort of checking whether what the first agent claimed they had done was actually done. If you think about it, what you as an engineer did sort of in the prompt engineering and context engineering phase, a lot of it was actually very repetitive, and there
Yes.
were patterns there which
hmm
are quite straightforward to automate. And so this is why nowadays people invest a lot more in those sort of higher level agents who generate prompts
Orchestrate
on
that.
your behalf, right?
Yeah.
So that's the
Yeah.
whole point. And that's actually what the Steinberger quote comes down to. You shouldn't be writing the prompt. You should have an agent that knows how to
Write the prompt.
produce the next prompt.
Yeah.
and
Correct.
and it's if you Google loop engineering, you're going to have a lot to read because this is what everyone talks about right now, and it's just a very natural progression from where we've come from.
Matthias, often when I'm seeing things, particularly these articles, these new patterns that are evolving, I look at this going, this is no different than running an actual engineering team. I mean, instead of having people and managers of engineers and teams of engineers, I'm instead just giving that to an agent, and we're basically mimicking, I feel like in a lot of ways, the exact same structure as we would be doing like development with a team. I would talk to a manager. Here's our main objective. This is the feature that we have. Here's the research that I have. Okay, Mr. Manager of engineering team, you go figure out how to build the CI/CD pipeline, the new feature, the new UI. Like it's up to you to figure it out. What other inputs do you need, right? And so you let them just go build, task everything out, break it down into manageable elements. That's knowledge that we would give to people and have them do it. It's just this all just feels like a repeating process we would normally have done with teams. We're just kind of moving this up a layer.
Yeah, I think layer is the crucial point here. That's how I think about it. It's all about sort of which layer are you as a human at, right? And in an ideal world, you want to be as high up as possible, right? And if you think about it, you know, an engineering system has so many different layers, right? The lowest one would be one particular problem to address. I don't know, a bug fix, or at this particular feature to the CLI.
I'm the
or so,
TypeScript function writer of that thing. Like that's what I do, right?
Yeah. And so if you don't have a layered system, what you have to do if working with agents, you have to prompt it, you have to await their response, and then you have to somehow judge whether the response is good. And you can close that, or whether you need to push back on and have them do another round, right? And so at this lowest layer, you can easily imagine how you would create an agentic loop that does that on your behalf. But then you're one level up, right? And then you can think of, well, now someone can be a supervisor that actually has multiple of those work items, and they're responsible for it. And you give them an entire milestone, let's say, of 5, 10, 15 work items, and then they can coordinate how these low-level loops run. And then from that, you can go one level up, and you can have someone who oversees an entire project, right? And turns that into milestones, et cetera, right? So it's almost infinite with respect to how high up you can go, but all of that depends, and this is really what loop engineering comes down to. All of that depends on very good agent-driven verification. If you're not able to have an agentic loop defined where you get complete confidence from your agent judging that the task was completed successfully, the whole thing is going to break down. And so this is the real technical difficulty nowadays.
So looking at this one, Matthias, you shared with me an interesting article from LangChain, which I think LangChain does a really good job on articles. I've found them to be very beautiful, very informative. I've learned a lot from them. I have the link of that inside the chat window. So if you want to learn more about what an agentic loop is, how does this work, now you can have some really rich documentation. And I would agree with this one. I've also found when working with my team, Matthias, the team members on my team that have been doing engineering for a while and have been leading others or directing others, I feel like are getting really good at being able to get great output from AI agents. So that engineering team lead or manager, giving them the time to learn how to use agents, learn how to build loops, learn how to build patterns, I think really is going to be a big advantage. And so that skill set is I don't think it's lost. I think it's just shifting slightly from what it was and how to like use it to build software and things moving forward. So absolutely loving this one. Great article. Let me ask this question directly to you, Matthias. Have you built a loop system yet? Have you played with making one or creating one, or do you have like versions of like a similar looping system?
So
you've described to me in the past, like I think you've built this already,
exactly,
months ago.
Yeah,
but now people are actually getting on board with this.
Yeah, so I've built my own, and it's being refined every day.
Mhm.
But it's grown step by step from me establishing sort of some routine,
Yep.
how I sort of engage with my agents, and then figuring out what I'm actually doing. I don't have to be doing. This is something which I can sort of codify, and where there's judgment involved, I can
Mhm.
delegate that judgment to an agent that I trust, right? And
Sure.
so it ended up sort of as a sequence of those sort of gradual letting go of stuff I did myself, as opposed to now handing it over to an agent. So I mean, it's quite abstract. So something very specific, right?
Sure.
A long time ago, last year, I established a system where I would use GitHub issues to basically start new work. The
Yeah.
issue would contain basically specs and requirements, and
Mhm.
I would then I had a setup where I can delegate an issue to an agent,
Mhm.
um, and the very first iteration of that was me delegating to an agent, and then sort of the agent ran in GitHub Actions and came back at some point with a pull request,
Sure.
right?
Yep.
And so for a while, what I then ended up doing was I got notified the pull request was created. I went into the pull request, had a quick read of
What
what the
happened?
summary was,
Yep.
but then I would delegate it to another agent using a skill,
Yep.
and that
Go review
agent
this.
would basically run a review skill,
Yep.
and
Sure.
it would specifically come back either with a ready for merge verdict, but
Yep.
in most cases it would come back with a whole range of bits that needed to be addressed, right?
Sure.
And then when that happened, I would then basically um, invoke yet another agent with a different skill, and that skill was uh, 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 uh,
Like the project
targeting
management.
the previous response. It
Yeah.
had to inspect what was raised as
Mhm.
existing issues, and it had to work on that. And then once that agent was done, I came back and invoked the reviewer skill. So as you can see,
Yeah.
there's a
Yep.
recurring pattern here. It's very laborious when you do that manually, and so this is just an example of something that I've then basically turned into an agent-driven workflow, because it doesn't need me, you know, to sort of invoke another agent with another skill, right? This is
Yes.
definitely something you can delegate, and
Automate more
all
of it.
it takes is to review the outcome, and to make a judgment call. And this is really, why we need sort of an LLM in the loop here, to make a judgment whether or not to consider this done, or whether to sort of push it back to an implementation agent. And
Sure.
so, there we go. That's one example, and I'm very, very happy with that now, right?
And most of your example here, as you're doing like this, I have a feature, write out the issues, fix an issue, resolve the issue, evaluate the issue, and come back. This is verbatim like what's happening in this article around. They're talking about exactly that flow pattern. So in lieu of that, that pattern of things that looping around, were most of your agents running right now? I mean, at the time, I think when you're doing this, tokens were cheap. All of those agents were in the cloud, right? Most of that work was being done with agents that were from services, the Premier models. Are you looking at now moving some more of that, like dividing some of that work to some local and some cloud models or some Premier models? Like, what is your thoughts right now? Of like,
Right.
I think this is the shift I think I'm seeing. Right, that's a great pattern, but I don't want to pay the high cost of all those tokens for all that work to be done in Premier models. So, how does this change moving forward?
So personally, I have not really shifted much to local models. I
Mhm.
only use them for privacy reasons,
Okay,
when I actually don't want to send stuff into the cloud. But
sure.
I don't use them sort of for cost reasons, because
Okay,
we have a lot of good alternatives if you want to be cost efficient. We have so many models to choose from, which is why I talked about Vercel AI Gateway earlier, right? So
exactly.
this
Yep.
this is how you get access, to a whole range of differently priced models, and that's where I've been doing most experimentation. Basically,
Okay.
what can you achieve
Yeah.
with non-Premiere models? So basically, not GPT or Claude, right?
Mhm.
Um, Oftentimes at a fraction of the cost, without actually um, without giving up too much. And so this is where the loop engineering comes back in, because obviously if you have the kind of loop which I explained earlier, where an agent drives that constant ping pong
Mm.
between this agent does the implementation, that agent does the review. If
Yep.
this is automated, then you can afford for a particular feature to take 20 or 25 of those loops, which, it may well take additional loops when you use a cheaper model, but you can
Yep.
afford to do that. You would still save money at the end of the day, right? It
Yeah.
will just sort
Yes.
of take some
True, a little
extra work,
longer
right?
potentially.
And
Yeah.
so with that kind of setup, I would also recommend that the reviewer is the more expensive model
Yeah.
and the implementer is the cheaper model, actually,
Okay.
right?
Makes sense. Yes. And the idea is like require that the more expensive model with the better reasoning skills,
Mm-hmm.
you're telling it in its skill, you're telling it when you write this issue on GitHub, be very verbose,
Mm-hmm.
like you're going to give this task to an agent to build. Like you literally describe, like, I want you to build this for very detailed, define the inputs, define the output, be more verbose.
Mm-hmm.
Because again, going back to what we've seen in papers before, which is that first shot on the model is by far the best. You're going to get your best results on that first very clean context window. If you don't get it dialed in that first shot, the second shot, third shot, fourth shot, as you continue talking with it, it just continues to corrupt its context and it gets confused and it doesn't really give you the results you want. So the closer you can get to that one shot prompting with more descriptions up front, the better your output will become anyways.
So my solution for that, or my sort of way of working, I
Mhm.
talked about using GitHub issues for specs and sort of starting new features, right?
Yes. Yeah.
I never write those myself. What
Okay.
I do is I create an issue where I have an idea, but then I've got an agentic loop where that idea is actually researched,
Mhm.
validated, and converted into very detailed specs that an implementing agent then actually can work with quite well, even if it's not a top tier model, right? So
Oh.
before I even get into the implementation and review loop, I have a research and specification loop, which is
Yeah.
really crucial as well,
Mm.
particularly if you don't want to be reliant on very expensive top frontier models, basically, right?
Mhm.
If you
Mhm.
throw stuff into Opus and GPT-5.5, fine, you can afford to be vague.
Yeah.
They'll figure it out. But not all of us have money to burn. So if you want to be a bit more efficient there, then
Yeah.
invest more into planning, which is effectively what I'm talking about here, right? And
Mhm.
then the planning agent is definitely not going to spend as many tokens as an implementation agent would be if you give them a vague prompt to start with.
Mhm.
And that's definitely worth it. So that research and specification phase is extremely important. And yet again, this can also be another agentic loop, right? Um, uh, so I
Yes.
think of producing specification in the same way as actually implementing code.
Mhm.
A specification requires the exact same verification loop, for instance, right? Um, in fact, I actually, for my sort of non-trivial projects, I maintain all my specifications in under source control. They don't just live in a GitHub issue or so.
Mhm.
They go through a whole source control and pull request and review cycle, and a specification for a particular feature is oftentimes multiple files.
Hmm.
It ends up being very, very detailed.
I find this very interesting that you've used GitHub as like your main source of um storage of information, repos as information, and issue tracking, and getting all these task things. One of the items I look at, I was looking with Alex Powers recently around his tool, which is the Task Flow Assistant, which is a similar thing. When you ask it a question, and then it builds a bunch of documentation. But instead of doing it through GitHub and GitHub issues, it's basically building a series of markdown files. Like, hey, I'm going to design the plan of what we're going to build. From that plan, I'm going to make a checklist, and in that checklist, we'll do a lot of these deterministic patterns, making sure that we're able to loop through and build out the infrastructure that we need for the task flow or the particular workspace or infrastructure. So I like the idea that you're going down the GitHub route. I personally, in our company, we're using a ton of GitHub, and I think the integration, the tight integration between GitHub, agents, execution of things, GitHub Actions, that makes a lot of sense. And I think, Matthias, this comes out of your world of, you're a developer, like this is comfortable to you. I was always kind of not hesitant, but I didn't really understand what was going on GitHub. I'm using it so much now, like it's become very clear to me. Like I just, the amount of consumption that I use directly on top of GitHub, what's local, what's remote, what's a branch, what's not a branch, is this branch going to be permanent or not, like protecting branches. There's a whole bunch of new things that I haven't really been exposed to, but now it just becomes like second nature to me, and conceptually I'm there. Do I know how to write the direct commands in Git to do all those things anymore? No, I tell my agent to do that, but I do know that I need to go fetch changes every time I'm working on code things to pull things in to what I'm doing and how I'm getting code back out to those different branches. So I'm becoming much more familiar with the terms. It's becoming like second nature now. But I think that's just because of my rich exposure to that platform and how I use that platform with my agents. Let me ask you another question on this one. Sure. This might be just kind of a separate thought here. A pattern that I'm seeing evolve in my workflow is, on my local machine, I have a whole bunch of repos just from different projects all over the place. Throughout my day, I want agents or an agent to work on various projects. Now, I use GitHub to track my changes. I use GitHub to like keep record of those code items. But now, a lot more recently, I went on a trip. Matthias, you told me this recently for you. I went on a trip and I had a GitHub Copilot running on my computer here locally at home, and I had a Claude agent running at home. And both of them I turned into remote sessions. So I could talk to GitHub and I could talk to Claude Code and give them commands and work on projects. I found it really interesting. Like, how do we handle multiple repos, multiple projects with a single agent? So what I'm finding is I'm pointing the agent, starting it locally on my machine, putting it at the root folder. So I do on my computer, I have C repos, and that's where I put all the repositories of all my projects. So I'm pointing the agent at that root level of the folder so that it can see every single project. And then I can say, okay, agent, we're going to work on project Power BI tips website. Oh, and it finds the repo. Okay, I found the repo. I can go into it. There's already an agent file there. It has instructions for the agent. The agent can then have context awareness of that project. So I can kind of switch context. And so what I'm doing more often now is I'm giving my agent, we're going to work on this project for the next 15 minutes or 20 minutes or build something or fix something. Give it the context, tell it the folder, it goes into it, does the work. It says we're done. We push it, complete it. And then all my CDI, CD stuff kicks in and builds the app. Do you do something similar? Do you point your agents at a root level? Do you only use them in the service? Like, what's your workflow with like using agents on top of multiple repositories or projects?
Right. Yeah. Great question. And particularly if you want that agent session to be really long running, which I'm sort of hearing between the lines that's what you were after, you need to make sure that let's call it main agent, that main agent, it does not do any research or implementation and is merely there to delegate.
Oh, interesting.
And if you do that, then you're actually able to, particularly if you use Claude, where you get 1 million token context window on most models. With that one, you can go for days and days without having to recycle or restart your session. But only if you're able for this main agent to understand that you've given it a task and then for that agent to basically be able to delegate to another agent with its own context window to actually do the task, right? And this is where the GitHub Actions integration I talked about earlier comes in, right? So that this agent that you're talking about, the one you're interfacing with, that's meant to overlook several projects. If that were using GitHub issues, for instance, to kick off sub-agents to work on particular items inside that particular repository, all it needed was to produce the prompt, create an issue using your GitHub login, which it has on your machine, and then have some sort of watcher in place, which Claude, by the way, is really good at, to find out when that issue when that agent that's running in GitHub Actions is done, right? And so high level, that is a very scalable architecture where your main agent is the one that you interface with and who sort of understands, what's the world of all your projects. But it would never ever go into any of those projects specifically, because then you basically waste then you load too much stuff into your context window. It would only go as far as translate your request into a viable prompt and delegate the prompt to another agent. And that way, we talked about layering earlier. That way
and
you're at a very high layer, right? Because all the sort of real
like the engineering manager layer.
Exactly. Everything else happens on lower layers, which means that happens with dedicated agents, that have their own environment, their own context window. They get a task, they do it, they come back, and then an agent one level above responds to the task, right? So ultimately, this is what loop engineering is, right? In very simple terms. Obviously, implementing that for real is a whole different story, because there are just a lot of variables that you can play with. This is definitely an area where we're going to see lots of products and companies and innovation and all of that. Ultimately, it'll be quite hard for any single engineering team to decide, which system do they want to invest into, because there's just so much choice right now.
This is, I think, the hardest part right now. Every time I look around the corner, there's like a new system showing up, a new AI, a new system, a new service that's changing how I want to think about things. We haven't. It feels to me like a lot of the technology in the AI space is still proliferating. It's still fracturing, and there's many new ideas coming out all at the same time. We haven't quite yet gotten back to the consolidations phase. Like, okay, we pick these 3, 4, 5 handful of things. Think innovation is happening so fast that we're not able to consolidate yet. There's still the branching effect of many new patterns, technology pieces that are coming out. Awesome. All right. Well, I think we've talked about many of our main topics today. We talked about some pricing. We talked about looping and agents, which I think is extremely powerful. We'll have some more reads around that in the near term. One final kind of just point of note here I want to just throw out for people who are using Power BI and specifically agents to build Power BI. Haven't had a lot of time to work on it last week, but there's going to be more videos coming here in the near future. Rayfin is absolutely amazing. I think it's a wonderful program, a system that allows us to build things agentically. You may have also heard that the Power BI skills, so skills for Fabric, have appeared. And in those skills, you can now use skills to go talk directly to Power BI Desktop and have desktop build things for you. So all of these things I think need to be on our docket for explaining and showing and demoing how these tools work directly in here on the podcast. So we'll come up with some good content for Friday. Friday we'll do another session where we're actually going to get in our computers, share our screens, and actually show people exactly what's happening for these different tools and systems that are coming out. So that being said, Matthias, thanks for another great conversation. I'm learning so much from you. I'm learning so much from the community. This is super fun. We appreciate your time today. Thank you all for listening. We appreciate you out there as well. Let us know in the comments if you like this kind of content, if you like what we're doing here. Please subscribe to our channel as well. It helps us broaden our horizon to other people who may want to hear about this. And if you have questions, submit them down below, and we'll monitor them on YouTube or probably turn them into new topics.
Absolutely. Thanks, Mike.
Thanks, Matthias. We'll see you all next time.
Okay.
Agentic thinking. Agentic thinking.